The Lagos afternoon sun was bright, casting a golden glow over the busy streets. People were moving in every direction, and car horns blared in the heavy traffic. Abeni sat in the back of her black Mercedes, looking out the window, lost in thought. She was used to this traffic and often let her mind wander while she waited. But today she felt more restless than usual. At 52, Abeni was well known in Lagos. She was beautiful, wealthy, and owned a successful design business. Her life looked perfect from the outside, but deep down she felt empty. Her son Femi was grown and busy with his own life, and after her marriage ended years ago, she hadn't found love again. Despite her achievements, loneliness had crept into her heart. As her car slowed down in traffic, something caught her eye. She saw a young man sitting on the sidewalk, surrounded by colorful paintings. His work was bold and alive, showing the streets of Lagos in a way that seemed real and full of emotion. She leaned forward, curious, and asked her driver to pull over. Stepping out of the car, Abeni walked toward the young artist. He was busy working on another piece, his hands covered in paint. When he noticed her, he stood up quickly, a little surprised. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said politely, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Good afternoon," Abeni replied with a warm smile. "Are these your paintings?" The young man nodded, looking proud. "Yes, ma'am. My name is Ayomide. I paint Lagos as I see it. The city is wild, but it's beautiful too." Abeni couldn't help but smile back. There was something genuine about Ayomide. His spirit and love for his art were clear in every brush stroke. She looked closely at a painting of children playing in a poor neighborhood. The background was rough, but the children's faces were bright and happy. She felt her heart soften as she studied the scene. "These are wonderful," she said, glancing around at his other paintings. "How long have you been painting?" "Since I was little," Ayomide replied, his face lighting up. "Painting is everything to me. It's kept me going through tough times." His honesty touched Abeni. She could see how much his art meant to him, and it reminded her of her own journey to success. Before she realized it, she had bought 2 of his paintings and was listening to him talk about his life. She was surprised by how easily they connected. She felt alive, as if something inside her had woken up. Ayomide told her about his daily life as a street artist, his struggles to make ends meet, and his dream of one day being known for his work. Their conversation felt natural, like they'd known each other for a long time. She found herself laughing at his jokes and feeling lighter than she had in years. Eventually, she realized it was getting late and told him she had to leave. But as she turned to go, Ayomide spoke up. "Thank you for stopping to talk to me, ma'am. It means a lot." Abeni paused, touched by his words. "Call me Abeni," she said softly. "And thank you, Ayomide. You reminded me that there's still beauty to see." He smiled, his eyes filled with gratitude. She gave him a small wave and returned to her car, her mind filled with thoughts of their unexpected meeting. For the first time in a long while, she felt excitement stirring in her heart. In the days that followed, Abeni couldn't stop thinking about Ayomide. His art, his smile, and his passion for life had left a mark on her. She'd hung his paintings in her study, and every time she looked at them, she felt drawn back to that street corner. One afternoon, she decided to go see him again. Her heart beat faster as she approached, feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. She found him working on a new piece, his hands covered in fresh paint. When he saw her, his face lit up, and she couldn't help but smile. From then on, Abeni started visiting Ayomide regularly. They spent hours talking, sharing stories about their lives, dreams, and struggles. Little by little, their connection grew stronger. Despite their age difference and the gap in their backgrounds, they understood each other in a way that felt rare and special. One evening, as they watched the sunset over Lagos, Abeni felt emotions she hadn't felt in years. She knew people would see them as an odd pair. She, a wealthy older woman, and he, a young artist from the streets. But none of that mattered. All she knew was that with Ayomide, she felt happy and alive. In that quiet moment, as they looked at each other with unspoken understanding, Abeni realized her life was changing in ways she had never imagined. Abeni's heart felt lighter every time she thought of Ayomide. He was young and full of energy, and being around him made her feel young again too. She found herself looking forward to their meetings, eager to hear his thoughts and see the world through his eyes. She started visiting him almost every week. At first, she told herself it was just to support his art, but soon she knew it was more than that. Ayomide made her laugh and reminded her that life didn't have to be so serious all the time. With him, she felt free from the pressures of her business and the expectations people had of her. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Abeni invited Ayomide to join her for lunch at a quiet hidden cafe she loved. He was surprised but excited, and as they sat together, Ayomide couldn't stop smiling. He had never been to a fancy cafe before, and Abeni enjoyed seeing his amazement at the decor, the food, and the simple pleasure of being treated as an equal. "I've never had food this good before," Ayomide said with a grin as he took a bite of his meal. "You live in a different world, Abeni. It feels like a dream," Abeni laughed softly. "I know it's different, Ayomide, but I don't care about the fancy things. I enjoy your company." Ayomide looked at her, surprised and a little shy. He had thought Abeni was only being polite by spending time with him, but seeing her smile warmly at him, he felt something deeper, a connection he hadn't expected. As they talked, Abeni shared parts of her life she usually kept private. She told him about her lonely moments, about how she had built her business with hard work and little rest, and how sometimes, even with all her success, she felt empty. Ayomide listened closely, nodding as he heard her story. It made him respect her even more. "I understand," Ayomide said, his voice thoughtful. "Sometimes, even when I'm around people, I feel like no one really knows me. But when I paint, I feel alive. I guess I paint because it helps me feel less alone." Abeni felt a warmth in her chest, realizing they shared this same loneliness. In the quiet moments that followed, they just looked at each other, both feeling the growing bond between them. Their friendship slowly turned into something deeper. Abeni would spend hours with Ayomide, watching him paint, sharing stories and laughing. Ayomide found comfort in her presence, and for Abeni, he was a source of joy she hadn't felt in years. The age difference between them started to feel like just a number. One evening, as they walked through a park, Abeni felt bold and reached for his hand. Ayomide glanced at her, surprised but happy, and held her hand gently in return. They walked in silence, both feeling the weight and sweetness of the moment. Abeni knew people wouldn't understand. Society would judge her for being with someone so much younger, and she knew her son Femi wouldn't approve if he ever found out. But as she held Ayomide's hand, none of that mattered. For once, she didn't want to care what people thought. After that night, their connection deepened even more. Abeni and Ayomide shared their fears, their dreams, and their hopes. Ayomide had never felt this way about anyone before. He saw Abeni as more than a wealthy woman. He saw her as someone with a big heart, someone who understood him. And for Abeni, Ayomide was more than just a young artist. He was a reminder that life was still full of beauty and love. One day, as they sat on a bench, Abeni looked at Ayomide, her eyes full of warmth. "I don't know what tomorrow holds, Ayomide," she said softly. "But for now, I'm happy. You've brought so much light into my life." Ayomide smiled, his heart racing. "Me too, Abeni. I don't care what people think. As long as I'm with you, I feel complete." They didn't need any other words. In that moment, they both knew their lives had changed forever. But even as their love blossomed, Abeni couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might come. She didn't want Femi, her son, to know about Ayomide. Not yet. Femi had always been protective, and Abeni knew he would be upset if he found out. She also worried about people gossiping or trying to ruin what they had. But she chose to live in the present, ignoring the worries for now. As their secret love grew, Abeni and Ayomide promised each other they would face any challenge together. They knew their love was unusual, but it was real, and for them, that was all that mattered. Abeni and Ayomide's relationship continued to blossom. Every moment they shared was precious. Abeni felt younger, more alive, and Ayomide felt understood in a way he never had before. They both knew that their love was unusual, but they were willing to hold on to it no matter the odds. But as careful as Abeni was, keeping her relationship with Ayomide a secret became harder with time. They often met in quiet places or far from her usual circles, but Lagos was a city where secrets rarely stayed hidden for long. One afternoon, as Abeni sat in her office, her phone rang. It was her son, Femi. "Hello, Mum," Femi said in a cheerful voice. "I thought I'd drop by and take you to lunch today. It's been too long since we caught up." Abeni's heart skipped a beat. Femi didn't visit often. He was usually busy with his own work and friends. She glanced at the two paintings Ayomide had made for her, now hanging proudly on her office wall. She'd kept their love private, not wanting anyone, especially Femi, to judge or question her choices, but it looked like her careful bubble was about to burst. When Femi arrived, they exchanged hugs and he looked around the office, his gaze landing on Ayomide's paintings. "These are nice, Mum," he said, examining the artwork. "Did you get these from one of those street artists? I've seen similar styles downtown." Abeni nodded, trying to keep her tone light. "Yes, they're from a very talented artist. His name is Ayomide." Femi's brows raised slightly. "He's good. It's interesting you're collecting street art now, Mum." Abeni simply smiled, saying nothing more about it. But she could tell Femi was curious. He'd always been perceptive, and she sensed that he'd ask more questions if he felt something was off. They shared a pleasant lunch, talking about family, friends, and Femi's work. But the mention of Ayomide lingered in the back of Abeni's mind. She knew she had to be careful. A few weeks later, everything changed. Abeni had just spent a lovely evening with Ayomide, sharing stories and dreams under the open Lego sky. As they walked to her car, laughing and chatting softly, they didn't notice the shadow of someone watching nearby. The next day, Femi showed up at Abeni's house unexpectedly. He looked upset, his usually calm face twisted with anger and disbelief. "Mum," he started, not even sitting down. "Are you seeing that artist, Ayomide?" Abeni's heart pounded. She had hoped to keep her relationship with Ayomide a secret from Femi a little longer, but now, faced with her son's intense gaze, she knew the truth had to come out. "Yes, Femi. Ayomide and I are together," she said calmly. "It's not something I planned, but he makes me happy." Femi stared at her in shock. "Mum, he's young enough to be your son. People will talk, and don't you think he's only with you for your money? He's a street artist with nothing to his name." Abeni took a deep breath, her heart heavy. She loved her son deeply, but he didn't understand. "Femi, I know it's strange, but age doesn't matter to me. Ayomide is kind, respectful, and honest. I haven't felt this alive in years." Femi shook his head, clearly upset. "Mum, this is madness. He's using you, can't you see that? He'll take what he wants and leave you heartbroken." Abeni felt tears well up, but she held them back. "I understand you're worried, but I'm not naive. Ayomide doesn't care about my money. He cares about me. I've seen it in his eyes, in his actions." Femi's anger softened, replaced by frustration and worry. "I don't want to see you hurt, Mum." She reached out, touching his arm gently. "I know, but please trust me. This isn't a decision I made lightly. Just give us a chance." Femi didn't respond. He left soon after, leaving Abeni with a heavy heart. She knew that Femi's reaction was only the beginning of the challenges she and Ayomide would face. But she was ready. Her heart was set, and she believed their love was strong enough to survive. In the days that followed, Abeni and Ayomide faced the weight of Femi's disapproval. But despite the tension, they found strength in each other. Ayomide too felt the pressure. He feared he'd hurt Abeni by coming into her life. Yet, every time they spoke, every moment they shared reminded him that their bond was real. Together, they chose to ignore the doubts and focus on the happiness they brought each other. It was a love that had come unexpectedly, but they both knew it was worth fighting for. Abeni's life grew more complicated after Femi learned about her relationship with Ayomide. She felt torn between her love for her son and the new happiness she'd found with Ayomide. The nights became restless as she wondered if her son would ever accept the man who now meant so much to her. Femi's disapproval didn't just stop at words. He began showing up unannounced, trying to catch Ayomide at the house or questioning Abeni about their relationship in a way that wore her down. She understood his worries, but his behavior hurt her deeply. One afternoon, Femi showed up at Ayomide's art spot unannounced, finding Ayomide just as he finished a painting. The young artist was caught off guard by Femi's stern expression. "We need to talk," Femi said, not bothering with any pleasantries. Ayomide nodded, sensing that the conversation would be difficult. He put down his brush and faced Femi, who wasted no time getting to the point. "You might think my mother loves you, but she doesn't see clearly right now," Femi said, crossing his arms. "She's vulnerable, and I'm not about to let anyone take advantage of her." Ayomide's face was calm, but Femi's words stung. He'd imagined this confrontation but hoped it would go differently. "I understand your concern, Femi, but I love your mother. I'm not here for her money or any advantage," Femi scoffed. "Love, you're just a kid. She's twice your age. Don't you think this is ridiculous?" Ayomide felt a mix of frustration and sadness. He wanted to explain, to defend himself, but he knew Femi wouldn't easily believe him. "I know it's hard to understand, but I truly care for her. I didn't plan this, it just happened." Femi shook his head, clearly unconvinced. "My mother deserves stability, someone who understands her life and has her best interests at heart. I can't let you mess that up." Without another word, Femi turned and walked away, leaving Ayomide feeling shaken. This wasn't just about Femi's disapproval. It was about Abeni's world and the battles they'd both have to face if they were to stay together. Ayomide knew he needed to prove himself, not just to Femi, but also to Abeni and everyone who doubted them. That evening, Ayomide went to Abeni's house to tell her what had happened. He was hesitant, fearing he might upset her, but he knew honesty was important. Abeni listened quietly as Ayomide explained the conversation. She felt a pang of pain, but she wasn't surprised. Femi's actions were hurtful, yet she understood he was only trying to protect her. "I'm so sorry, Ayomide," she said, reaching out to hold his hand. "Femi's protective, and he doesn't understand what we have, but I don't want you to feel discouraged." Ayomide squeezed her hand gently. "I'm not going anywhere, Abeni. This is hard, but I'm ready to face it if it means we can be together." Her heart swelled with pride and gratitude. She knew Ayomide's love was true, but seeing his determination gave her strength. They both realized this was a challenge they would face together. The weeks that followed were tough. Femi's disapproval hung over them like a storm cloud. The whispers and judgment from society didn't make it easier. But Abeni and Ayomide leaned on each other, finding comfort in the love they shared. One evening, Abeni invited Ayomide to a formal event at her friend's art gallery. She wanted to show him a part of her world, hoping it would bring them even closer. When they arrived, Ayomide was nervous but excited. The crowd was sophisticated, and he felt a little out of place in his simple suit. But Abeni stayed close to him, introducing him to her friends and colleagues with pride. Despite the glances and whispers, she held her head high, determined to show everyone that Ayomide was someone important to her. At one point in the evening, a group of guests began questioning Ayomide about his art and his background. Abeni noticed their subtle judgment, but Ayomide handled it with grace, sharing his story honestly and proudly. She was impressed by his confidence and knew that he was winning people over one by one. As the night drew to a close, they stood on the balcony, looking over the city lights. Abeni turned to Ayomide, feeling grateful for his presence in her life. "Tonight was wonderful," she said softly. "You showed such strength, Ayomide. I'm so proud of you." Ayomide smiled, pulling her close. "Thank you for bringing me here, Abeni. No matter what anyone says, I'll stand by you. I'm ready to face anything as long as we're together." Their love felt stronger than ever, a bond that could withstand any storm. And though they knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, they also knew they had each other, a love that would keep them grounded and unshaken. In the weeks that followed, Abeni and Ayomide continued to face hurdles. But their love only grew, a beautiful and rare connection that defied expectations and brought them both a joy they'd never known before. Together, they were ready to prove that love could bridge any gap, even when the world stood against them. Abeni and Ayomide's relationship had weathered several storms, but the tension from Femi's disapproval lingered. Though Abeni was growing used to the whispers from society, Femi's continued anger and silence weighed on her heart. She loved her son deeply and hoped that someday he would see Ayomide the way she did. One Saturday morning, Abeni decided to visit Femi, hoping to reach some understanding. When she arrived at his apartment, she found him alone, looking surprised but not exactly pleased to see her. "Mom, this is unexpected," he said, closing the door behind her. Abeni smiled gently, trying to put him at ease. "Femi, we need to talk." I know things between us have been tense lately, and I want to hear how you're feeling, Femi sighed, running a hand over his face. Mom, it's not just that I disapprove, I'm worried. Ayomide is young, from a different world than ours. How can you trust him with your heart? Abeni's face softened and she took a deep breath. I understand, Femi, but you have to believe me when I say that Ayomide loves me for who I am, not what I have. He sees me as a person, not just a wealthy woman or your mother. I haven't felt this alive in years, and I wish you could see how good he's been for me. Femi looked away, struggling with his thoughts. I don't want you to get hurt, Mom. I know, and I appreciate that more than you know, Abeni said, placing a hand on his shoulder. But please, Femi, try to see Ayomide the way I do. Give him a chance. Femi nodded slowly, though he didn't say much. Abeni hoped it was a small step toward healing the rift between them. Meanwhile, Ayomide continued to feel the weight of Abeni's world. He knew he didn't fit the traditional image of a partner for a woman like her. People were curious about him, and not always in a kind way. He heard whispers and felt the stares whenever they went out together, but he tried not to let it affect him. He knew that his love for Abeni was real, and he was determined to prove himself worthy of her, even if it meant enduring judgment and scorn. One evening, Ayomide received a call from an unknown number. He answered, surprised to hear Femi's voice on the other end. Ayomide, Femi's voice was firm. I want to meet. There's something we need to discuss. Ayomide hesitated but agreed. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe the next day, and Ayomide spent the night wondering what Femi wanted to talk about. Part of him feared it would be another attempt to break him and Abeni apart. But he also hoped that maybe, just maybe, Femi was beginning to understand. When they met, Femi's face was serious, though there was a glimmer of something else. Perhaps understanding or even respect. Ayomide greeted him, and they both sat in tense silence for a moment before Femi spoke. I've been thinking, Femi began, folding his hands on the table. My mother has always been strong, independent, and she seems happy with you. Ayomide nodded, feeling his heart lighten a little. I love her, Femi. I'm not perfect, and I know people doubt me, but I'd never hurt her. Femi sighed, rubbing his temples. I've come to realize that my mother's happiness matters more than my opinion, but I need you to promise me something, Ayomide. Ayomide leaned forward, his gaze serious. Anything. I need to know you're committed to her, that you'll stay by her side no matter what, Femi said, his voice barely above a whisper. She deserves someone who won't walk away when things get hard. Ayomide's eyes softened, and he nodded firmly. I give you my word, Femi. I'm here to stay. Abeni has given me love and support I never dreamed of. I'll do whatever it takes to protect her heart. Femi seemed to relax, though he still held a hint of caution. Good. Then I'll try to be more open, for her sake. Ayomide's heart swelled with gratitude, and he extended a hand. Femi hesitated, but then shook it, a silent promise passing between them. Over the next few weeks, the tension began to ease. Abeni noticed that Femi was slowly warming up to Ayomide, though he still had moments of doubt. She felt a sense of peace knowing that her son was at least trying to understand. One evening, Abeni invited Femi to dinner with her and Ayomide. It was the first time they would all share a meal together, and Abeni was both nervous and excited. She prepared her best dishes, wanting the evening to be perfect. The dinner started off a bit awkwardly, with Femi and Ayomide exchanging polite but guarded conversation. But as the night went on, they began to relax. Laughing over old family stories Abeni shared and talking about Ayomide's art. For the first time, Abeni felt a glimmer of hope that they could all be a family in their own way. Toward the end of the evening, Femi raised his glass. To my mother, he said, his gaze warm but a bit emotional. And to Ayomide, who seems to have found a way to make her truly happy. I'll be honest, I didn't understand it at first, but I can see now that love comes in ways we don't always expect. Abeni's eyes filled with tears as she raised her glass, grateful beyond words. Ayomide looked at Femi, nodding in appreciation, his heart full. The evening marked a new beginning, a fragile but hopeful step toward acceptance. As Abeni and Ayomide left Femi's house that night, Abeni took Ayomide's hand, her heart light with happiness. Thank you for being patient, she whispered, for standing by me even when it wasn't easy. Ayomide looked at her with deep affection. Abeni, I'd go through it all again just to be with you. Their love had endured its first major test, and though they knew more challenges lay ahead, they also knew they were stronger together. As Abeni and Ayomide's relationship blossomed, the challenges they faced became more complex. Femi's acceptance had brought some peace, but a new test was about to arise, one that would push their bond to its limits. One afternoon, Ayomide was at his art stall when a well-dressed woman approached him. She introduced herself as Mrs. Akintala, a gallery owner, and immediately began complimenting his art. However, her true purpose became clear when she shifted the conversation to Abeni. "I know you're dating Abeni," she said bluntly, "and I have an offer for you. If you leave her, I can introduce you to the right people and make sure your career skyrockets." Ayomide's stomach churned. He'd never considered choosing success over love, but Mrs. Akintala wasn't backing down. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice firm. "I won't leave Abeni," she scoffed. "You're young, you'll regret it, but I can still offer you a future if you make the right choice." Ayomide didn't hesitate. "My choice is Abeni, and that won't change." Mrs. Akintala left, but her words haunted Ayomide. Shortly after, he noticed a decline in his business. Gallery owners stopped showing interest in his work, and his stall began to see fewer customers. It felt like he was being pushed into a corner. He didn't tell Abeni at first, but she noticed his stress. One evening, Ayomide opened up to her about Mrs. Akintala's offer and the consequences he was facing. Abeni's heart broke. "I'm so sorry, Ayomide. You're struggling because of me." Ayomide smiled gently, taking her hand. "I'm not struggling, Abeni. I'm doing this for us. I chose you, and I don't regret it." Abeni, though pained by the situation, refused to let them be defeated. "We'll get through this together. I won't let them tear us apart." Ayomide focused on his work, creating pieces that reflected his love for Abeni and the trials they were facing. One day, a journalist noticed his art and wrote an article about his journey. The recognition Ayomide had been missing began to grow, and his paintings were soon showcased in galleries across Lagos. Abeni was overjoyed, and even Femi began to see Ayomide in a new light, recognizing the sacrifices he had made for her mother. Finally, Ayomide held his first successful exhibition. As he looked at the crowd admiring his work, he realized that love and hard work had finally paid off. He found success not by compromising his values, but by staying true to his heart. At the exhibition, Ayomide and Abeni shared a quiet moment together. "You did it, Ayomide," she whispered. Ayomide smiled, squeezing her hand. "I couldn't have done it without you." They stood side by side, stronger than ever, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, their love unshaken. Abeni and Ayomide's lives began to settle into a rhythm that felt natural and strong. They had weathered storms of doubt, judgment, and struggle, and now, as the final challenges had passed, their relationship felt unbreakable. Their bond had not only survived society's scrutiny but had deepened in ways they hadn't imagined. Months passed, and Femi slowly began to embrace the idea of Ayomide as part of their family. He could see that Ayomide's love for his mother was genuine. More than once, Femi had seen how Ayomide took care of her, not only in public but in quiet moments at home where true love was most evident. One Saturday afternoon, Femi visited Abeni's house, surprising both her and Ayomide. "Mom, Ayomide," he greeted them, smiling. He looked more relaxed, and something in his gaze showed a quiet respect. Abeni's face lit up, sensing something special about the visit. "Femi, what brings you here?" Femi sat down, looking at Ayomide directly. "I wanted to thank you, Ayomide. Thank you for standing by my mom and for loving her the way she deserves. I was wrong about you," he admitted, his voice low. "And I'm sorry for the way I acted." Ayomide nodded, touched but calm. "Thank you, Femi. That means more than you know." Abeni's eyes sparkled with emotion. Seeing her son's acceptance finally given openly, her family was healing, and her heart was full. As their relationship continued, Abeni and Ayomide found a new purpose together. Inspired by Ayomide's art and their journey, They decided to give back to the community. They opened an art center in Lagos for young, underprivileged artists. It was a place where young people could learn, create, and express themselves freely. On the day the art center opened, people gathered to celebrate, including family, friends, and even some of the skeptics who had once doubted them. Femi was there too, standing beside his mother with pride. The center was filled with laughter, color, and life, reflecting the vibrancy and resilience of the city they loved. Ayomide and Abeni stood hand in hand, watching as young artists explored the space. They saw themselves in these youths, in their hunger for expression and dreams of being seen. "This is beautiful, Ayomide," Abeni whispered. "I couldn't have imagined this without you." Ayomide smiled, looking at her with deep affection. "You believed in me when others didn't, Abeni. You gave me the strength to create something that matters. I'll always be grateful for that." As the evening wound down, Abeni and Ayomide stood outside the art center, watching the sun set over Lagos. They were both quiet, feeling the weight of everything they had overcome and the joy of everything they had built together. It was a moment of peace, a moment that belonged only to them. "Abeni," Ayomide said softly, taking her hand in his, "I never thought love could be like this, that it could survive so much and only get stronger. You've changed my life." Abeni smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "Ayomide, you're the best part of my life. Loving you has taught me so much about courage, about living fully." They stayed like that, watching as the city lights began to sparkle against the darkening sky. Their love story had faced every test and come out victorious, a testament to the power of love and the strength they found in each other. In the days and years that followed, Abeni and Ayomide's love became a cherished story among their family and friends. A story of two souls from different worlds who found each other and built a life filled with meaning, laughter, and love. They knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but they also knew that together they could face anything. Their journey had been one of resilience and trust, of following their hearts no matter what anyone else thought. And in the end, they found something rare and beautiful, a love that had been tested and had only grown stronger. And so, as the city of Lagos moved around them, alive with its own heartbeat and energy, Abeni and Ayomide stood hand in hand, ready for whatever came next, together always. If you enjoyed Abeni and Ayomide's story, please like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt and inspiring tales. Stay tuned for more stories that celebrate life, love, and the beauty of resilience.